And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about as we tick down to Election Day. Each campaign making their closing arguments, and Donald Trump had the best closing argument today. If you vote for Biden, your kids will not be in school. There'll be no graduations. There'll be no weddings, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no 4th of July. None of them are going to come. You'll get nothing. Now, here's the thing. Here's my problem. Other than it's kind of hysterical, and you go, where did that come from? And it came from the guy who was sitting in the Oval Office. It's one of these things where you go, he does realize that he doesn't have the power to stop Thanksgiving from coming. Like the Grinch couldn't stop Christmas from coming. The president can't stop Christmas from coming. Maybe he thinks he can. And this is one of those moments where you go, maybe his view of the office is a little more expansive than most of us want the office to be, that he actually thinks that the president can cancel these events, that you're not going to be allowed to get. Well, wait a minute, the wedding thing, yeah, I'm actually thinking that through again. No same-sex weddings, those we will make illegal if he's reelected. So maybe he's on to something there. Maybe that's a little one of those Freudian kind of slips where it's in his mind. But Thanksgiving is, a couple of weeks away. And another little secret, and as much as I hate it, and as much as I fear the next couple of months, Donald Trump is still going to be president for Christmas and Thanksgiving. And sadly, if you look at what's going on, we may all be quarantined, the sane and rational amongst us, because today we saw almost 85,000 new cases across the country, the single largest one-day expansion in the last 8 months, beating the previous record of just a couple of days ago, when it was 83,734 cases. We're seeing spikes in Iowa, we're seeing spikes in Illinois and Ohio. Fortunately, not a huge spike where I'm at in Pennsylvania, so maybe we may, because we've got a sane and rational governor who's been, kind of restraining things a bit. But things are getting worse. And I know, Rick, nothing to see here, nothing to see. Move along. Nothing to see. People are going to get better. They're going to be fine. Going to be fine. Problem? As of today, over 44,500 people are hospitalized with the coronavirus. Now understand, and this is what I've been saying since day one, the reason that I took this so seriously from the beginning was that our healthcare system is finite. There are only so many beds. There are only so many nurses, only so many doctors, only so many ventilators, only so many things to care for people. If you exceed your capacity to care for people, you're going to cause more deaths, not just from the people who get coronavirus, but from everything else. And this has always been my concern. We're now seeing a rise. We're now seeing this giant spike, and we knew this was coming. They've been saying from the beginning, these next couple of months were going to be the most deadly and the most dangerous. So prepare for it. And yet we have an administration who, not only didn't prepare, has mocked it. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said, the day after the election, it's all going to go away and no one's ever going to hear about the virus again. And you go, do you really believe that? Have you been brainwashed to the point where you think that that's it, it's done? Now, maybe once we get a vaccine and a bunch of ways to care for people, that they can do it at home and not clog up our healthcare system, maybe that's a different argument. But right now, while you still have people who are heading to the hospital, being on ventilators, taking up ICU beds, that's a problem for the rest of our system and the rest of the people. And it's scary. And I'll tell you, I'm looking at the polling for the election, which is just in a couple of days, and I'm really surprised that the lead isn't much bigger. I mean, Biden has you know a pretty good sized nationwide lead, but it's shrinking in places like Florida. It's shrinking in places like North Carolina. It's shrinking in some of the battleground states. Now, Pennsylvania, Biden still has a 7-point lead. Thank goodness, Pennsylvania, because without Pennsylvania, I don't see a way for Trump to be reelected. And for me, that's a good thing. Because if you really want Christmas, if you really want Thanksgiving, if you want weddings and graduations and birthday parties and all of those things, getting a handle on this virus and making sure that your joyous occasions don't end up killing Granny. Maybe getting a handle on this, which we're 8 months into this and we're actually worse off than when we started. Maybe getting a handle on this is the way we should be going, instead of holding super spreader events all across the country and stranding people in parking lots. The other day it was Omaha, Nebraska in the freezing cold. Yesterday it's people baking in the sun in Arizona. And here's the thing, and I've taken some heat on Twitter over this and on social media. This is not Donald Trump's fault. When you go to these events, you prepare. And this is one of these things I just had a lecture with my kids about this. You prepare when you go to these events. And I reminded them, when I took you to the inauguration a couple years back before Trump, and we had all those extra coats and all those extra layers. Yeah, that's why. When we go places and I bring an extra something along, that's why. It's called being prepared. And it's something I think we've forgotten. So I'm looking at these news media reports of how horrible it is that these people are stranded, and I'm going, that's because they're stupid. And as my grandmother said, she used to say it often, I didn't get to be this old being stupid. You learn life lessons, and you don't do dumb things more than once. So if you're the people in Arizona and you saw the people in Nebraska stranded, maybe you should have thought of that. Just kind of a thought. But here's the thing. Good news today on the economy. We saw a little bounce back up. Now the Republicans are losing their mind, going, "Oh my gosh, it's great! 33. What was it? 33.5 or some giant 33.1, just giant annualized rate of growth of GDP, 7.4% in the second quarter. It's just amazing. It's fabulous. We're fabulous." The problem is it's we're still way down. In fact, what the one economist I was reading said is we're almost as bad off as we were at the height of the Great Recession. So all of the stuff that Obama did to move our economy forward and all the stuff that Trump has taken credit for has basically all been wiped out. Wall Street's fat and happy. They are doing wonderfully well, thank you very much. But average everyday working people, not so much. So this joy over the economy is so wonderful. Take a step back. And the best analogy that I saw was from Austin Goolsbee. I can never pronounce his name right. Goolsbee. Who said it's like losing $100 and being ecstatic that you won 60 back. That's kind of where we're at. We lost the $100. And we've gotten 60 of it back. There's a long way to go to get back. I think he also used another analogy. It's like scoring, giving up 10 runs, but then you score 5 and you think you won. You didn't. And the thing is I know our messaging is all screwed up, and I know that we want our team to win because that's how politics has been framed. It's not about issues anymore. It's not about making lives better. It's about my team. I bought the hat. I got the shirt. They sent me a flag. Put the bumper, committed to the bumper sticker. I'm more of a magnet guy. I'll commit to the magnet. But here's the thing. We're in this team sport position. And, the simple things that we used to take for granted, simple things like counting the votes. I'm getting hammered by the right wing. All these right wing messaging firms who are saying have all these guests, and I'm thinking about pulling one or two of them in over the next couple of days, just to get their argument of why we shouldn't count the votes. I mean, I see no justification for why we don't count every vote. And as I said, to somebody earlier today, I said, look, the reality is had we just counted the votes, had people been allowed to vote and we counted the votes, we wouldn't be in this kind of angry place where the angry minority, the Trump supporters, are running the country. George W. Bush probably does not win in 2000 if we count every vote. And he certainly doesn't win if we don't throw, hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls, which is why they are so in this mindset of we've got to suppress votes, we've got to have obstacles for people to voting, which is why you're never going to see a Republican come out with a plan on how to have universal voting and making it easy. I'm talking to people every day now who are going, I went down to the courthouse and I got my ballot and I filled it out and I dropped it in the box. It was really easy. It was simple. And I didn't have to wait in lines. It was, there were maybe a couple of people, but it wasn't an hour long. This is actually a pretty good system. And I did it on my time. I was able to drive over, and take care of it. And if it was too long, I could come back tomorrow. This is the kind of stuff that I've been talking about for years. We need to expand our access to the ballot box so that everybody can vote. You cannot have a country that is supposed to be governed by the consent of we the people if you don't have, and I know this is a tough one, if we don't have the consent of the people. We're about ready to head into an era where conservatives and hyper corporatists, radicals, I would argue, are going to head our Supreme Court, who represent the views of a minority of this country. The vast majority of people support people marrying who they love. Doesn't matter to me one way or another. The majority of the people in this country support a woman having the right to choose. A majority of people in this country support sane and rational immigration. A majority of the people support a lot of the popular things and a lot of the things that this court is going to, over the next couple of years, be undoing. Basically the 20th century. The Affordable Care Act, like it or not. And I know, Trumpkins, like it or not, the Affordable Care Act is right now very popular. Because people realize, they're going to take it from me. And they have nothing to replace it with. So when Barrett decides to put the stake in the heart of the ACA and millions of people lose their coverage, we make pre-existing conditions great again. We kick kids off their kids' plans, and we make it wholly unaffordable for people who do have illnesses that will no longer be covered. We have chaos. And what you look around now, this administration has been about chaos. And our voting is a big part of this. You see all these horror stories. We've known there have been problems all along, and we've done nothing. We're hearing stories again about Russia. Russia's interference in this, that, or the other thing. And yet, what have we done? What we've done is we have a president who called it all a hoax. We have a political party who said it was all made up. And yet we've got a Mueller report that says, no, there was contact, lots of contact between the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was good reason to investigate what they were up to. But nothing. And we now find out that evidently this laptop thing, a lot of really curious stuff has popped up around this, where evidently some of the information for it came out from some organization that was made up, from a guy who was made up, They literally, out of whole cloth, created a company and an employee to leak Joe Biden's son's emails. So it got me thinking that now I guess this is one of those moments where you go, Melvin Reddick's got nothing on the new creation, Martin Aspen, who is now Swiss. As well, Melvin Reddick was the made-up guy for Facebook, who evidently lived in Harrisburg and was a big Trumper. Didn't actually exist. They made him up solely for Facebook. He was the first creation of flamethrowers that the Russian soldiers or GRU or criminals or however you want to frame them created out of whole cloth. There he is. There's Melvin. Now we've got Martin Aspen, who is Swiss and an intelligence expert, who came up with an intelligence report, a fairly lengthy one, that now we have a president of the United States going around mimicking. In fact, the weird thing about it, and my next guest I hope is going to answer some of these questions, may have gotten himself impeached. This is the brilliant part of this. He may have gotten himself impeached over information that was fabricated by a made-up entity. I mean, if I were to sit down and write this story out for a bad 80s spy movie, no one would have bought it. I mean, we literally have the dumbest man possible in the White House, the most gullible, wanton person possible in the White House, and you want him with the nuclear codes. I'm in this moment where, as I've said, imagine all the things that we know about him and his dealings, and then imagine all of the other insanity that's there that we haven't figured out yet. Which is why, for me, you got to vote for Joe Biden. You got just to find out the crimes, the backroom dealings, and the insanity, and to stop the chaos. I mean, imagine if there would have been a story of Barack Obama creating an artificial intelligence being to leak a report. Just crazy. Quick break, right back. Up, and the union gives a voice to win on the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1823. That was the day abolitionist and women's suffragist Mary Ann Shadd Cary was born. Her parents were free blacks of color in the slave state of Delaware. They were involved with many prominent abolitionists and active in the Underground Railroad. The family moved to Pennsylvania, where Mary and her siblings were educated in Quaker schools. As a young woman, Mary became a teacher and returned to Wilmington, Delaware, where she opened a school for black children. Once the Fugitive Slave Law was passed in 1850, Mary and many other free blacks fled to Canada to safely continue their abolitionist work. She opened a school for fugitive slaves in Windsor, Ontario, just across the river from Detroit. Mary soon came under fire in the local press for insisting the school be racially integrated. She responded by starting her own newspaper, the Provincial Freeman. She and her husband Thomas often traveled to the United States to continue their anti-slavery work. They were present at John Brown's 1858 Constitutional Convention. Mary worked with Osborne Perry Anderson to publish his 1861 memoir, A Voice from Harper's Ferry. Anderson had participated in Brown's raid and was the lone African-American survivor. After her husband's death, Mary returned to the United States with her children to help recruit black soldiers for the Union Army. Once the Civil War was over, Mary moved to Washington, D.C. to teach. She enrolled in Howard University, where she earned a law degree. There, she joined the National Women's Suffrage Association and worked with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. She continued to advocate for civil rights and women's equality until her death in 1893. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'll tell you, I'm still stuck on this NBC news report of the made-up guy, Martin Aspen, who is this great Swiss intelligence agent who has come up with this document that basically the basis for all of the Hunter Biden emails and all of the money that evidently he got from the Russian mayor's wife and all of this stuff. Evidently, this is where it's created from. So Melvin Reddick wasn't enough. We've now created an intelligence person out of whole cloth. And then the weird thing is, a year ago today, we had Alexander Vidman testify about all of the stuff, the perfect phone call, which is anything less than perfect. Well, I guess perfect if quid pro quo is your goal. But all of this stuff, just absolute chaos, absolute insanity. And here to share some thoughts on, well, if you're looking at us from the outside, what do we look like? I've asked Naveed Jamali to come talk with us. He's a Newsweek editor at large, also the Bell Fellow at the Anti-Defamation League's Center for Technology and Society, a former double agent and also the author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. Naveed, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, that's a great intro. Thank you. Hopefully I can hit the bar that high.
We just ran out of time.
So Ukraine, let's just listen, Rick. I mean, I almost feel that to delve into these layers of the onion is a disservice because it's all BS, right? We all know that. Like there's not a shred of believability of anything other than manufactured Russian disinformation. And look, what we're seeing, and someone who worked actually with a Russian intelligence officer, the shift, Rick, that has happened in 2016 is they're not using Russian intelligence officers. They're using Rudy Giuliani. They're feeding this stuff to U.S. persons, and U.S. persons are either wittingly or unwittingly essentially carrying Putin's water. And that's what disinformation is. So it's just make it clear. It's washing of information so that when you pass it, you don't know from whence it came. And the person who's saying it might appear legitimate to you because they are potentially a legitimate person. So that adds believability. But if you start tracing it back, as you were just doing the intro, there's really nothing to it. It's all BS.
And it's amazing to me because, months ago, evidently they came up with this guy, and they got an AI, kind of just out of nowhere, created this company that, nobody's ever heard of. And that this guy doesn't even exist in Switzerland. And then came out with this report who a blogger somewhere put online and then got pushed to the presidency during the presidential debate, claiming what this guy had, or this made up person claims actually didn't happen.
So it's not surprising, right? I mean, this is essentially, we know that Putin wanted to interfere in the election. We know that he has, in 2016, he showed a strong preference for Donald Trump, which is a sort of lawyerly way of saying that he wanted Trump to win. So of course they're going to do it the same way this time around. The difference is, again, it's that washing of information, right? Yeah. So, the Russians and the Soviets before them were masters in disinformation, and it doesn't take much, right? You just have to manufacture some sort of half-assed way of where that information came, and then once it's out there, it gets on Tucker Carlson's show, gets into debates, and now it's on Facebook, it's on Twitter. That disinformation, that connectivity from where it came from the Russians is lost. Yeah. And it's like telephone. It's like the last person who said it. Well, we're going to judge the validity of that information on the last person who said it. And the last person who said it could have been Rudy Giuliani or someone in the GOP. And those people seem quasi-legitimate. So there you go. I mean, that's how they've done it. It's low buck, low tech. And unfortunately, people just eat it up.
But here's the thing. I mean, we have intelligence agencies that are supposed to be able to figure this stuff out and to hold people accountable. I mean, I look at, we've been talking about the Steele dossier forever. We've been talking about 2016 and all of the Russian interference, or, I would argue the act of war and fiddling and doing what they did in our elections. And yet we're no closer to stopping it. We're no closer to identifying it. We're no closer to dealing with it for half the country than we were when it started.
Well, so that's a really good question. And I think that it's important to understand when you say stopping it. Look, we're a country of laws. We have a constitution. U.S. intelligence and the FBI and everyone else can only operate when they have authority to do so. So the U.S. intelligence can assess make an assessment that there's disinformation that is coming. They can make an assessment that that in fact pieces of stuff that are out there are Russian disinformation, and they can choose to declassify, to make to issue warnings and to issue statements. Honestly, that's kind of about it, with one exception. They can take on active measures. So for what they can do, and what a lot of the people in the intelligence community are quite well livid about, is that we're not kind of pushing back in Russia. So, but that's very different from saying like, hey, the intelligence community can't go and throw handcuffs on Alex Jones or someone else for spreading Russian disinformation. Look, we have freedom of speech. We're a country of laws. People have the right to do that. You can't legislate against stupidity, right? Unfortunately. So I think it's important to make that distinction, that essentially the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, but certainly the Russians, they know this. They know we're an open society. They know that we're a nation that has freedom of speech. They don't. And they take advantage of that. And frankly, as much as I hate to see this stuff, the alternative, I think, is a little chilling. I don't think I'd want the CIA or any of the intelligence agency weighing in on, freedom of speech and trying to censor things. But, look, where the pressure should be put on is places like Facebook, is places like Twitter. And I think to some degree they've been responding a little bit. But, banning QAnon and all that stuff is a good start. But, they shouldn't be allowing obvious disinformation, especially in the election, to be passed across their transom. I think they have both an ethical and legal obligation to police some of the stuff that's out there.
Yeah, but then you get into the argument of who decides what's disinformation and what's true and what's not. And as my son loves to say, what's the definition of true? And this is where we get into this weird world.
Well, so I can tell you unequivocally. Look, and here's what I'd say to Trumpists. Facebook and Twitter is not a public utility. You don't have any expectation that you have to be able to use Facebook and Twitter. They're private companies.
Right.
So unlike the government, and like you're saying, the government should not get into the business of deciding, who has the right to say what and what is real and what is disinformation. They can label things, perhaps, but Twitter can say, hey, we don't like you. We don't want you on Twitter. Go pound sand. What's your, they can do that. They're a private company. They don't have to let you on Twitter. They don't have to let you tweet things. So I would say that it's up to the platform companies. Rick, the reality is the reason they don't want to do anything is because they don't want to admit that they have culpability in the fact that what people write on their platforms, they're somehow responsible for that. They're very uneasy with that, accepting that. So, but they should. I think they have to.
Yeah, it's we're in this weird world where we're really polarized, and I talk to Trump supporters who they're all on the same page. They've read from the hymnal and they're preaching their word.
That's right. And
we're literally on the sidewalks, and I've been using this analogy a lot. We're literally on the sidewalks shouting platitudes at each other, and nobody's in the middle of the street. And I don't know how to get back to between the curbs with all of the misinformation that's out there.
Well, you bring up a really good point. Is whether Trump win or lose next week, Trumpism is here to stay, right? That's a thing. So what do we do? What do we do with that? That's a bigger question. And I think there's, again, even if Trump leaves, I don't think his brand of whatever you want to call it retreats the next day either. I think it's going to be around, and it's going to be, this is going to keep happening.
Well, I think Trumpism is not just Trumpism. I think it's Republican Partyism.
Yes.
I think this is who the Republican Party has been for a very long time, and they've been growing towards this. And their dominance of talk radio has been the place where they've disseminated all of these talking points and all of these conspiracy theories and all of this stuff, which is why 15 years ago is why we started this program, just to try and add just a small amount of balance and other thought into the world of talk radio, because it is so far off to the crazy. I turn on the radio and all I hear is about Rudy and Trump and about how they're dead right and the liberals hate America. You hate America if you're not waving the Trump flag.
I agree with you, and it's the irony of it is I spend a lot of time. I compare it to the Palestinians. Right, the Palestinians were told, your lot in life is terrible, and it's a result of the Israelis, and they're sort of bred generationally to believe that it's the Israelis' fault. And there's never any discussion about the Arabs and how the Arabs won't let the Palestinians in some cases where they're Palestinian refugees, they won't give them citizenship. What does that have to do with Trumpism? I think it's the same sort of thing generationally. When you see, and realistically, Rick, I mean, look, the Rust Belt, these are communities that have been forgotten, that there's not opportunity, there's not economic investment, there's not education investment. And so they've been left behind. And instead of being told that you've been left behind because of the Republicans, right? You're told that it's the reason you've been left behind is because of Obama. Is because of the Democrats. It's because they're the ones it's not that coal is no longer, a fossil fuel that we want to burn. It's that Obama wants to come out and punish you. And they're fed this,
Yep.
and they're fed this generationally, and they believe that they should be in a better place in life, which I think they have a right to do that. But they're told that the cause of that is the Democrats and Republicans. So, it breeds hate. It really genuinely breeds hate. And you're absolutely right. Like that's whether it's Trumpism, whether that's Republicanism, the GOP, unfortunately, what Trump has been able to do, Rick, is I think tap into that hate and that anger.
No,
and like focusing on positive things, he's just focused it on the Democrats and the liberals and Obama. And it's the most useless thing for these people because, getting angry at those people is not going to solve, their deep problems. The opioid crisis, for God's sake. I mean, that's that's a real thing that we need to deal with.
no, absolutely.
Look
And
at the Sackler family.
it's the reason that I said he was in April of 16. I said he was going to win, because I lived exactly what you talked about. I grew up in Cleveland, which was a manufacturing powerhouse at one point, and now is a hollow shell of what it once was manufacturing wise. You go up and down the roads that used to house thousands of factories. They're all empty. They're all falling down. And those people remembered those golden days.
Sure.
And Trump said, look, we're bringing it all back. It's all coming back. Don't sell your house, he told the people in northeastern Ohio. We're bringing those auto jobs back, even though the plant in Lordstown is now closed and all
Right.
those jobs are completely gone. Never mind the reality. He sold them the message, much like you said.
It pains me, but like when we think about, I've lived in cities my whole life, and I live in Seattle now, and when you go to Oregon or Montana or any of the other states, there's these vast expanses. And I'm thinking of just land, and I'm thinking, my God, if you had solar panels, wind farms, whatever, what a great industry you could have. These states could be giving the power to the cities that are so desperately needed. And look, as technology increases, as we rely more on Zoom and computers and the like, we need more technology. We need more electricity. And these parts, instead of being the heartland of the bread basket, they could be the energy basket. I mean, really, really could be. And you could create jobs, industries, like good careers. And the fact is that, the Republicans have been the biggest blocker of these regions basically reinventing themselves, redeveloping themselves, and having a rebirth in terms of their economy.
Yep.
I mean,
West Virginia is a
it's-
perfect example.
Exactly.
I mean,
you
West
wanna bang
Virginia,
your head on the wall.
to use your coal analogy, I mean, look, the reality is Obama didn't do anything to coal. Natural gas killed coal. Fracking
Yes,
killed
exactly.
coal. It just is
Exactly.
what it is.
Right.
And they still think that the coal jobs are coming back, even though they've
Right.
lost more coal jobs under Trump. But you don't hear the same kind of trumpeting of the loss of jobs now because it doesn't fit that narrative.
Right. It's almost, Rick, it's almost like, toll booth collectors when you used to go in and give the money, and like no one does that anymore. We have, the Easy Pass and whatever else. Are we going to say we have to bring toll booth drivers back? Like technology and progress moves forward. Steamboats. We don't have steamboats. We don't have horse-drawn buggies. Like, I mean, progress and technology go hand in hand. And
Now,
to
your point, I
Yeah.
don't mean to cut you off, but to your
No,
point,
please.
now the problem is we don't want to lose those jobs. So the transition is where the problem is.
You're absolutely right.
For too long, what's happened is during that transition, we've left all those people behind, the angry voters who have been left behind. And we told them you're gonna go get jobs, and we're gonna educate you, and we had trade deals that planned for you losing your job, and you never attained the same standard of living, which is why I've been saying as we move into the automation tsunami of job loss that's coming, we need to start red circling people's incomes and guaranteeing them as their loss.
I completely agree. I mean, that's where Andrew Yang, I think, was really the first one to really normalize that concept of universal basic income. And I think you're absolutely right. Look, if you've been a coal miner for 30 years, I don't think it's fair to expect that you're going to be, that you can be retrained or that you should be retrained. But, we should support that. It's investing in people and making sure that they can buy things. At the end of the day, it's not just the decent thing to do, right? It's the right thing for the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So last line of questioning I've got for you,
Yeah.
Naveed, because part of your expertise is looking at how stable or unstable a country is. If you're looking at us from outside looking in, judging from all of the news reports of how our election is, there's all this chaos through our court system, through our legal system. What do you see when you look at us from the outside?
Well, I mean, I think you can sum it up best with the Netanyahu call that Trump just had, where Trump was like, trying to get platitudes from Netanyahu. Netanyahu would only say something to the effect of, I'm glad about the United States cooperation. I think that you're right. There's a lot of destabilization, but it's important to understand that for a lot of countries, Rick, they don't have this turnover of presidents, right? Like you have despots for life, or you have, or China, she's going to be in power till he dies, right?
Sure.
So I think that part of it is other countries are used to us turning over. What's dangerous right now is that they don't know who's going to be in power in a week, and they don't know, what's going to happen from that point on until January 20th. So I think that it is a dangerous time. I think that they see chaos, and with chaos, what worries me is, again, we talk about disinformation. The Russians, they don't want to get too far in, right? Because if they get too far in and Biden wins and he comes in and he catches them with their hand in the cookie jar, there's going to be repercussions. So how do they play it? How do the Iranians play it? How do the Chinese play it? And I think the best way I can also describe it is that they're being pretty aggressive, which should tell us something, that they see that it's not a bad idea to try to, cause chaos, that there's not, and look, Russia had no consequences because of 2016. That's incredibly dangerous. So if there's no consequences, there's no risk, there's only upside. So of course they're going to start interfering with us. And they see us as weak. They see us as manipulable. I mean, we're everything that we've gotten coming out of the Second World War. I feel like in 4 years, Donald Trump has really erased those gains.
Yep, and I keep saying that with his Supreme Court nominees, we're going to erase the 20th century.
Completely. That's what he wants. And I think that, it's this like minority, like hardcore right-wing evangelical Christian, base, and they're a diminishing, group. They're getting smaller and smaller. So the only thing they can do is control by the courts and by suppressing votes. So, I know I keep saying this to people. I feel like this is going to be a defining moment for the history of this country, and it's hard for us to see it because we're still in the middle of this trauma. It hasn't ended, so we haven't had a chance to look at it. It's a pretty defining moment for this country, and hopefully it goes forward.
Yeah, and you got to get out and vote. But Naveed, I appreciate you taking some time for us.
Of course.
I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us.
Anytime.
Good
Thanks,
stuff. Make sure you check out Naveed's book, How to Catch a Russian Spy. We'll get links out on how you do that. Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day that the National Organization for Women, or NOW, called for a strike by women across the nation. They called the day Alice Doesn't Day. This referred to a critically acclaimed movie by the director Martin Scorsese that came out the year before, entitled Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. The main character in the film is Alice Height, who pursues her dream of being a singer after she is widowed. The film was lauded by feminists as a story of women's empowerment. NOW used the film title and asked women to participate with the slogan, Alice Doesn't, You Fill in the Blank. Women were encouraged to participate in the day however they could, including refraining from volunteering, shopping, and if possible, working for one day to demonstrate their importance to the economy. Women who could not skip work were asked to wear armbands to show their solidarity with the cause. In an interview published in the Chicago Tribune, NOW President Karen DeCrow explained, quote, "There is a myth that women in the workforce could go home. But if they did, our economy would stop. If all the secretaries did not come to work, all things would stop." But not all women were excited about the day. Some anti-feminist women decided to protest the day by wearing pink, baking cookies, and performing other stereotypical female tasks. While now called the event a success, Time magazine deemed it a spectacular failure. One critique was that the event reflected the white middle-class dominance of the women's movement. Working-class women, and especially women of color, had a much more difficult time withholding their labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So no question, we are certainly divided. And this election, look, you don't need to be a genius to figure it out. We've divvied up into teams. Everybody's bought their hats and they got their flags. The question is, what's going to look like afterwards? Is there a way to bring the country back? Are we going to continue to be this divided? Is it going to be the urbans versus the rurals? The liberals and are we going to continue this, or is there a way forward? And my next guest has written a book that I think is going to be the first, or one of the first of many, that I expect to be deep dives into the divisions in this country. He's written the book On the Road in Trump's America, a journey into the heart of a divided nation, by Daniel Alot. Daniel, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
So, I guess congratulations, you're at the front of this, and I'm sure that it was an interesting trip. It's something that I got to tell you, I'm actually living in the middle of a rural community, so a lot of what you're talking about, I see firsthand.
Yeah, and the divide between rural America and urban America is deepening. You see it politically with urban areas are now dominated by the Democrats, and I saw that in places that were historically Republican, like Orange County, California, and Salt Lake County, Utah, are trending blue, quite progressive, and then more rural areas in rural Wisconsin and Iowa and even rural North Carolina are becoming very red, and they're Trump territory. And a lot of those places that I visited had voted for Obama in like the upper Midwest, and then they switched to Trump, and I'm pretty confident they're going to stick with Trump.
Yeah, I think if you've already got the hat and you've already committed, you're probably going to stay. Now, I've seen a lot of Republicans that have shifted, and a lot of that has to do with the economy and the craziness of the outward craziness. But you talk about that in the people that you've spoken to, that they think Trump is a guy of his word. Chaos aside, he does what he says.
Yeah, and among the few people who I met, among the hundreds that I interviewed, that changed teams, if you will, who voted one way in 2016 but plan to vote another way in 2020, among those who are voting for Trump this time, that was the thing I heard over and over again. Wow, this guy, he set out a very clear agenda. He told us what he was going to do, and he did it for the most part, with a few exceptions. But people really appreciated that he was clear about what he wanted to do, and then he did it. And not people aren't used to getting that from a politician, right? The cliche is sort of the politician who says one thing to get elected, and then they do something completely different. And with Trump, whether you like him or not, whether you like his agenda or personality or not, like, he's basically the same guy that he was when he ran 4 years ago.
No, you're absolutely right. And as I had said on Inauguration Day, expect a lot of chaos. Expect, because that was his management style as he ran his business. Everyone knew that. So everything was out on the table. We knew what we were getting into. I just didn't realize, and I said, look, it's going to be bad. And I think that Trump is going to be the great uniter. He's going to unite the country, probably against him, because I saw a lot of bad things happening. I am surprised that people have stayed as polarized as they have over this time period, especially when looking at the virus.
You expected them to sort of turn on Trump? More of that?
At some point, because the things that he was promising. He's going to build this big beautiful wall. Mexico was going to pay for it. He's going to bring back coal jobs. He's going to bring back all the manufacturing to the Rust Belt.
Sure.
I assumed people were going to go, okay, that's the reason I voted for him. It's the reason a lot of people I know voted for him. None of that stuff was ever going to happen, and didn't happen. So I assumed, their life wasn't going to get any better, and it hasn't. In fact, because of the virus, the people that I know who did vote for him have gone the other way. They're probably still not voting for Biden out of, they don't, one reason or another, and we won't get into that right away. But their lives aren't any better.
Yeah, I think a lot of his supporters feel like he did come through, and I think you touched on the two issues where he's really vulnerable on reviving manufacturing, which really didn't happen, and the wall. But even on like the wall issue, I think his supporters would say, well, he shut down the government for a month, for a record amount of time, to try and get that done, and it wasn't his fault. And really, if you go down the list of the top dozen things that he promised, he did accomplish most of them. With the Supreme Court things, like
Yep.
a lot of people who I talk to, and you probably get this too, where they're just sort of like, why do evangelicals vote for Trump? Like, why did they, and why are they sticking with him?
Abortion, gay marriage.
Yeah, and the courts, and he's he's done pretty well on that from their point of view, right? With Coney Barrett now, the third Supreme Court appointment, he's appointed over 200 federal court judges, and they feel like he's done a better job than any other Republican president, including Reagan, in actually appointing pro-life conservative justices. And a lot of them do have a problem with his personality, his character, and as you mentioned, the chaos and just the drama of the last 4 years. But they're like, hey, Barrett's going to be there long after Trump's gone. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they're going to be there for decades probably. And so they're sort of keeping their eyes on the prize and not getting distracted
You're right.
with everything going on.
No, you're absolutely right. His legacy is going to be what the court does over the next 20, 30 years. And, as sitting where I sit, I see a lot of bad things, but you're right. The evangelicals, it's what they want, and it's what they've always wanted. So this for them is a huge win. You're right.
Yeah.
But here's the
and
thing.
they didn't get that with, go ahead.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I look at the premise, this argument of rural versus urban, and that's kind of always been with us. It just seems now it's gotten much more. People are much more invested in it, which is kind of bizarre to me as someone who grew up in a city and now lives in a rural area. I kind of see both sides and both perspectives. And I don't know that we live in the world where we can recognize both sides anymore.
No, and I think a lot of people, now you've lived in both areas, I think from my understanding, a lot of people don't quite understand what's going on in the other domain. So if you talk to people in the city, I live in D.C., and very few of them really seem to understand what's going on in rural America, maybe what the challenges for a farmer, what the rural gun culture, for instance, is like. And then you get people in the countryside who may not quite understand, for instance, what's going on with Black Lives Matter and all the protests over police violence, because it's not something that they encounter.
Right.
Right. It's not something. I mean, may not visit their family in the city, and so it's not something that they see on a day-to-day basis. So I think that divide, and I think especially for the countryside, where you have people, and you can speak to this. People look around, the roads aren't getting fixed, the schools are in bad shape. Their kids go away to college and in the college town and get indoctrinated with more liberal values, and they don't come back to work in the rural areas. And I think people are pretty upset, and that was one question I would ask people in the countryside, like, hey, are you resentful, or do you resent people in the city or the cities? And I was surprised at how often people would say, heck yeah, I do, because they feel like they're not getting their fair share of power or the resources. They're paying their taxes. They're living under the regulations imposed on them by the cities, and they don't feel like they have a say. And so I think Trump really hit on that. And the word I heard over and over again from people in regards to Trump and people in rural areas was that he listened to us. And you can argue over whether he did or not, but that's the feeling that there is, that he listened to our plight. He seemed to recognize that the work that we do is valuable, that we can't just get by as an economy on a combination of high-tech jobs and low-wage service jobs. We need that middle. We need, small businesses. We need rural agriculture, industry. And, his whole thing was always, we're going to make America great again, and we need your work. You in Middle America, you're vital to that. And I think a lot of people felt like they hadn't had that for a long time. And then when you add on top of it, the cultural conservatism, social conservatism that really resonates in rural areas, everything from abortion and guns to immigration and a lot of the debates over the meaning of America. I think that's why they're going to stick with him.
No, I think in the rural areas you're absolutely right. I do see the cities coming out in bigger numbers. Like here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, it's always a battle between the center of the state, which is very rural, and Philadelphia. And what's weird is I have some of my rural friends say that, well, we're paying and we're taking care of all of Philadelphia. When the reality is, when you look at the actual numbers, the massive subsidies come to rural areas from the cities, which is really kind of it's a weird, you can't explain that to them without them being offended. I'm going, that's just the reality, because poverty is real here. The job loss is real here. And to your point, Trump did hit on the message that I wanted to hear, which is, trade with China, manufacturing. It was actually the labor movement's message that he co-opted, which is why I think he did so well with union households.
Yeah, and I think he did better than any Republican president or candidate since Reagan, or maybe including Reagan. And I think, what's your sense is in terms of, well, I'm going to interview you now, in terms of how well he'll do among those households? I think he'll still do quite well, even though again, he didn't come through on a lot of the financial issues. I still think the cultural issues resonate really well, and everyone, even if they didn't have a job in manufacturing or wherever they were working, the economy was so strong before the pandemic that it almost didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, I think he will again do really well with the AFL unions, the building trades, the skilled trade unions. I don't think he'll do as well with the public sector, obviously, because of the Janus decision, and I don't think he'll do well with the CIO type unions, which are your manufacturing, because he didn't bring them back, and that hasn't been helpful to him. So again, I think it comes down to that split that's in the labor movement as well, of the original AFL CIO split. And I think he'll do well. I mean, especially here in Pennsylvania, where fracking is big, the pipeline is big. He'll do well with some union members. The parts that some union members are hesitant on are the things that he has done. The Supreme Court, the Janus decision, obviously, and then all of the NLRB decisions that have come down over the last couple of years that have been really harmful to the labor movement, as well as some of the Department of Justice or the Department of Labor's regulatory changes. So it's going to be interesting for me as a labor guy to see how that plays out. Like everybody else, I'm watching to see how the votes tally.
Yeah, and what's your sense in Pennsylvania? I mean, I visited Erie, Pennsylvania. It's one out of the 9 counties that I visited. Okay, and all the way from Florida out to California, and Erie, of course, has been hard hit by manufacturing job losses and other things in recent decades, and it voted for Obama twice and then swung to Trump by a small margin. And my sense is that could go either way. I mean, I was over there a few weeks ago during the first debate, and there were quite a few Biden signs compared to what Hillary was doing 4 years ago. And the Democratic Party there locally seems to, really be pretty active and doing a pretty good job. So I wouldn't be surprised if Erie County really swings back to the Democrats, and that'll be fueled by the city of Erie itself. The outlying areas will go to Trump again.
Yeah, it's for me. There's a whole bunch of variables. I'm saying if all votes are counted, if there aren't any shenanigans, I see Biden winning pretty handily, because there are, as you've said, in those places that Trump won, there's more Biden activity. He doesn't have the being saddled with Bill Clinton as his baggage. Also, I think misogyny played a big part of it here in the state, because the 3 row officers, all Democrats, won walking away by 5-6 points. Auditor General, Attorney General, and the Treasurer, they all won big, and the 2 women who ran for President and Senate both lost by 1%. So that wasn't for me so much as the Republicans came out in big numbers, as Democrats, split their tickets. And I do see Joe Biden picking up the kind of numbers that Obama got in Philadelphia, which is why I think Pennsylvania is going to go to Biden. That said, the rural areas, much to the premise of your book, is going to go heavily for Trump, and we're going to continue to have this divide. So in your travels, Do you see any way of bridging that divide? Because, the gun issue, I explained this to my friends. I said, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland where if you saw somebody walking down the street with a gun, duck because somebody's going to die. I now live in a neighborhood where, not too far from here is a free gun range where you can take the shotgun I've got over here and I can go down to the free gun range. There's a very different culture of what guns mean. Can you possibly bridge that divide? I haven't figured out how to. Do you see any way forward?
Wow, that's a big question. I think on a personal level, to the extent that it can be done, people just spending more time and having friends and family, if you have them in other parts of the country, just as it is on other issues of class and race and so forth, really, really helps to understand what people are going through. And I had lived in some rural areas, upstate New York, in my life. But when I really went out after having lived here for 18 years in D.C., I was kind of surprised at how different life is in let's say, rural Wisconsin, and how just unfamiliar I was with rural life and my values. Even though I'm actually quite conservative, my values tend to line up more with urban areas in terms of my likes and dislikes. So, but I think just living, just spending time with people who think differently, who live differently, and being open to their experiences. I think overall it can get us beyond the tribalism and how, the polarization that we see right now. It seems like when people engage, and I tell a lot of stories in the book about the tribalism and people falling out with friends, and even a few stories of people moving, graphic tribalism, they moved away from an area. In all cases, it was an area that Obama had won, and then Trump won, and more progressive people woke up one day and thought, I don't know who you people are anymore. I don't feel welcome, and so they ended up moving away to Detroit or to Waterloo, Iowa, bigger cities.
Right.
And it was too bad because I told all of them, I said, you should stay because your neighbors need to hear your point of view, and they respect you and admire you already because you're embedded in that community.
Exactly.
For you to move away is just really a shame.
No, and for me, I hear that every election cycle. Well, if Mike, I'm leaving. You hear stars say this. I'm moving out of the country, and I'm going. I'm not going anywhere. I love my country. I love my community. I'm a patriot. I'm going to stay and fight, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, no, that's great, and we need more of that. I think, and people are even if they do stay, I find people just saying, oh, you know what, we can't talk about it. We're going to just not talk about it anymore. And again, we need to be able to engage with one another. And I think one more thing is just the media needs to. I think it would really, most media outlets, as you know, are, in cities, right? And I think hiring people, if you're an outlet that wants to speak for the entire country or for the entire state, you need to hire people who maybe grew up in the countryside or have those experiences.
Excellent
That
point.
would really help.
Excellent point. The book, On the Road in Trump's America, A Journey into the Heart of a Divided Nation, written by Daniel Alot. We'll make sure we get links out on how you can pick that up. Good stuff. Daniel, great talking with you, man. Appreciate the time.
You too. Thanks, Rick. Take care.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That bleak day is now known as Black Tuesday, the day of the stock market crash that marked the start of the Great Depression. During the optimistic Roaring '20s, investments in the stock market soared. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow Jones Industrial Average quadrupled. By 1929, 2 of every $5 borrowed in bank loans were spent on stock investments. As stock investors overextended themselves, they failed to read troubling economic signs. Farm communities were sliding into an economic depression. Consumer credit was reaching unsustainable levels. The first signs or trouble began on Black Thursday, October 24th, when the market lost 11% of its value. Then on Monday, it slid another 13%. By Tuesday, the market opened in a melee. In the first 30 minutes, 13 million shares were sold. At the time, stock transactions were recorded on ticker tape. According to Time magazine, by the end of the panic-filled day, 15,000 miles of ticker tape had been printed. The final totals were devastating. The market had dropped another 12%. Stocks continued to fall over the next few weeks. In all, $25 billion was lost. That equals more than $300 billion in today's money. The events of 1929 signaled the beginning of a global economic depression. The depression was devastating for working people. Before the depression, there were 25,000 banks in the United States. By 1933, 11,000 of them had failed. Families saw their entire life savings wiped away overnight. Unemployment soared to 25%. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt implemented his New Deal policies to put people back to work. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Sometimes I don't know whether to weep uncontrollably, laugh hysterically, or just throw up. I recently did all three when I saw another gusher of greed pouring out of corporate America. This one is especially nauseating, given today's raging health crisis, for the culprits are major healthcare corporations. One perpetrator is Larry Merlo, CEO of our country's largest drugstore chain, CVS. In this time of COVID-19, customers are surging into the chain's 10,000 stores for everything from medications to masks. Yet, the boss has blithely left many of the pharmacies so severely understaffed that they pose a danger to public health. CVS pharmacists tell of frantically scrambling to keep up with filling prescriptions, answering ever-ringing phone inquiries, giving shots and COVID tests, stocking toilet paper, tending the drive-thru, etc., while also having to meet ceaseless corporate demands for cost-cutting and more profit. The result has been a dangerous work overload, with many pharmacists handling nearly 200 prescriptions in a 6-hour shift, about one every 2 minutes. Unsurprisingly, there's been an alarming rise in serious errors and week-long delays in providing critical medications for customers. Adding to the exasperation of local managers, who are allowed no say in staffing, is the infuriating level of heedless greed at the top. The New York Times reports that while CEO Merlo has failed to fund the staff his pharmacies need, he has generously funded his own needs. He paid himself $36.5 million last year alone. Then there's the mountain of interest payments and fees that CVS is paying to Wall Street bankers and lawyers who engineered Merlo's takeover of the Aetna health insurance giant last year. This is Jim Hightower saying, so while you're being underserved at a local CVS, just remember that boss man Merlo and his merger mercenaries are making a killing.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently, Billie Eilish, not a Trump supporter, and destroying our country and everything we care about. Now, here's the weird thing. I think I saw Billie Eilish on like Saturday Night Live. I'm not really sure. I had to look this person up. I'm not sure how destroying the country and hates America and everything we care about, and why this is important. Why it came out. Evidently, this was leaked. The Trump administration believes that since this person isn't a Trump supporter, hates America, was one of 274 celebrities that they were considering to run an ad. This ad campaign to defeat despair. It was to make us feel better about the virus. There were 10 approved. Ellis, clearly not one of them. Yeah, so there you go. Hates America. Jeez, oh man, crazy. 5 more days. 5 more days. This can all go away. And here to share some thoughts on Billie Eilish hating America, I've asked our good friend, Raw Story reporter Sarah Burris, to come talk with us. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Billy is lovely. I don't know what their problem is.
Hates America.
I mean, it makes sense that they would not like her because she's so creative and different and outside the box, and the White House is not that place. It's just like, oh, outside the box, no, back in the box, back in the box. So I'm not surprised that they didn't like her or half of the people that were on the list. I'm surprised Phil Collins wasn't on that list since Trump loves his music so much for his rallies.
Yeah, evidently Dennis Quaid, Dr. Oz, and Billy Ray Cyrus made the list, but not Billie Eilish. And I'm going.
Why Dennis Quaid? No, not Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, but I'm thinking Billy Ray Cyrus, is he really still a celebrity? I mean, if you really wanted to make people feel better, is that really the way to go?
No, I mean, I kind of look at him as like a dad of a celebrity.
Yeah. Once removed.
So old.
All right. Well, there is that. Anyway, I got to tell you, I don't feel better. I still feel despair because I'm looking at the numbers. Biggest day we've had in history. The biggest number of infections, almost 85,000 people now have gotten it. We beat the big record from just a couple of days ago, and I'm sure tomorrow we're going to go. We beat another record because we got super spreader events all over the place. Sarah, they're called Trump's rallies.
They're huge super spreader events, and now we're finding out that the rally a week ago in North Carolina, 2 of the people were at the rally who were completely independent of each other. They don't know each other. They're not related. They came down with the Rona. So, it's just, these are super spreading events, and if you don't get the coronavirus, then you'll get hypothermia, and if you don't get the hypothermia, then you'll get shot in the face with a fireman's water cannon, or you'll pass out from heat exhaustion, or, I mean, it's just like, he doesn't care.
No, he doesn't care.
That's the thing that's so interesting. I can't remember who said it this week, but somebody was talking about how it really seems like Joe Biden cares more about Trump supporters than Trump actually cares about his own supporters.
No, and that's completely true. But here's the thing. I don't care about those people either. And I know it's horrible. I know it sounds terrible, but I've thought about this. I've gone to those kind of big rallies. I've put myself in those situations, and I've always been prepared for not being able to get on the bus right away. And I've always been prepared for the delays that inevitably come. And I always have a backup way to get home. I go back to, I don't know when we stopped being a country that was accountable for our own actions and took personal responsibility for stuff. But I am so tired of the media saying, oh, these poor people left out in the cold, or these poor people left out in the heat. Understand, Trump doesn't care about anybody but Trump. He got his ride out. He was fine. He doesn't care about you. You're the stupid one that put yourself in that situation. Just my thoughts.
I have these moments where I'm just like, fine, I am so done trying to fight to protect people who don't want to protect themselves.
Nope.
And then, old people freeze to death in Omaha, and I get upset, and I'm just like, no, we have to protect these people.
Nope.
And then
my grandmother had the saying, I didn't get to be this old being stupid. Evidently, there are people who got to be old being stupid.
This is very true.
They're showing up to a super spreader event, Sarah, not wearing masks when they're the target demographic for the Rona.
One of the things that I was so annoyed with, somebody replied to one of my stories from last night on Twitter and said, I was at that Omaha rally. They didn't know how many people were going to be there, and that's why they ran out of buses. I was there, I know. And I was like, no, they did know how many people were at the rally because they bussed them in.
Yep.
So they knew what they were dealing with for busing them out.
And as my son pointed out, if it took you 4 hours to bus the people in, gonna take you 4 hours to bust the people out. Just kind of a thought. So if you got there on the first bus and you didn't get out because you got the front row seat and you didn't get on to the last bus, you spent a lot of time there. It's basic, simple logic, which evidently we've forgotten.
It's funny, all those pictures I look at, and it just reminds me of, just like people aimlessly wandering and that old saying about people who are lost. And it's sort of this metaphor for Trump voters in general. It's just like, oh, they're lost.
Oh,
They're
bless their
lost
heart.
in a sad circle of hell.
But hey, the good news today, the economy's back. I listened to Trump. Trump said everything's wonderful. The economy is wonderful. We've had this beautiful bounce back. It's great.
Yeah, and the market has spent the last 2 days tanking because the Wall Street has realized that there's no savior coming, and that the health crisis is linked to the economic crisis, as Stephanie Ruhle pointed out. So finally, the people on Wall Street have realized, oh crap, this is a thing, and it's going to be a while, and there's no stimulus coming, and Trump is going to screw this up, and the pandemic's going to get worse, and he's not going to do anything about it. If he gets reelected, he's definitely not going to do anything about it because he has nothing left to fight for.
Right.
Like what would be the point for trying to make people happy at that point? So it's frustrating because, now it feels more like we have to protect ourselves, now more than ever, because things before were bad, but now they're worse. And it's exhausting because I feel like I spent the whole summer, being careful.
Right. Me too.
And
I mean,
now
we're 8 months into this. I mean, had you done this right at the beginning, we should be pretty well through it. We should be
Yeah.
better prepared for this next wave. And sadly, we don't even have an infrastructure in place to where if we do say, hey, we got to lock down for a couple of weeks, that we make sure that people get payments to be able to stay home. We haven't even figured that out yet.
We have so much. This is really bad. And unless the Senate agrees that they're going to vote on a stimulus bill that the Democrats passed in May, then we got nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing. And that's why, again, a couple of days, the election, hopefully we see a shift. Any predictions for election day? Other than chaos? You can't go with chaos.
I keep going back and forth because I feel it depends on that. Quinnipiac poll threw me off today. That I did not expect those numbers, particularly when you look at Ohio. And I don't believe him. I don't know if I believe that number because it shows him really much higher up than I feel like than Biden should be in Ohio.
Yeah, I don't agree with it either.
I didn't expect him to pull out Ohio. I figured we were just like, really lucky if we get Pennsylvania, probably going to get Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, like that section. But holy cats, like I think if we get Pennsylvania, then we know for certain we'll get Wisconsin and Michigan and the other guys. So I really do feel like it's coming more down to Pennsylvania than, for me, it's more Pennsylvania than Florida.
Yep.
Florida's just a complete, bless your heart, like Florida's just a cluster. And the thing about the coronavirus is I feel like if I was a candidate for president, the last thing I would want to do with a virus that presents itself 3 to 5 days after point of contact would be to have massive rallies 3 to 5 days before people would be voting. That's just me. But particularly when you look at Tampa today, I'm looking at all those people being like, man, Trump better hope they voted.
Already, yeah. But here's
Yeah.
the thing. I mean, I thought Trump's closing argument was the best so far. If you want to have Christmas, if you want to have Thanksgiving, if you ever want your children to graduate, if you ever want them to get married, if you ever want to do 4th of July again, you better not vote for Joe Biden.
Which is funny because we just spent the last 8 months with weddings being canceled, graduations being canceled, holidays, birthdays, funerals, everything being canceled. And so that's already happened. And I'm not sure how it gets worse.
Oh, trust me,
other than more
we're
people-
getting there.
Other than more people dying.
Yeah, I mean, we're sadly, we see these numbers spiking. I have a listener who sends me his projections because he, unlike the guy who's in charge of giving Trump information, actually knows something about epidemiology. other than the X-ray tech that we've got, advising the president now, that herd immunity is a good idea. And the numbers that he's showing me are predicting these kind of rises, and then to a point where, very soon you're looking at 3,000 people a day dying, which, better hope they voted early.
Yeah, the number that I saw today was that we have increased testing by 14%, and our infection rate has increased by 60%. So clearly the testing is not causing the virus, because those numbers don't really add up. But yeah, I'm really worried once we start getting into the holidays, because I think people are still going to try and meet with each other. I'm going to fly home, but we're not having, it's just going to be me and my parents. But it's better than being by myself. That's what I keep telling myself.
And that's the thing. I mean, there's been a bunch of, we've struggled already enough. And, I keep coming back to, had we handled this right from the beginning, had we had a true leader, maybe we're not in this position. Maybe we're not looking down the barrel of what is to come. And I put this right at his doorstep. And clearly he has now taken the position, as was very predictable, that, he got it. He's Superman. He got through it. There's nothing we're going to do. He has no plan. In fact, Forbes magazine I guess it was yesterday, reported that Trump has put the virus as part of his accomplishments. And I'm going, did I miss something?
The Office of Science and Technology in the White House listed out their top list of Trump's accomplishments in his first term, and number one was ending the coronavirus pandemic. And so I got on Twitter and was like, it's over! We cured coronavirus! Congratulations, everybody! Go to the bar.
Yeah. I mean, the only way it's over is if you change the name.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, it's depressing. We may end up being a whole country that just eats microwave turkey dinners on the couch for Thanksgiving.
I'm not against turkey dinners. It's one of my favorites. Let's
microwave turkey dinners. This is different than the bag, or the fryer.
Okay. You fry turkey?
Oh my God. You've never had a fried turkey?
No, I never have.
Oh, dude, that's like total redneck too. You can't there's always videos every year at Thanksgiving of rednecks trying to fry their turkey indoors and
blowing themselves up.
Yeah, the oil is boiling. You don't stick a frozen turkey in a boiling pot of oil, you idiot. Especially if it's in the garage. You take it out in the driveway. Those are my favorite videos. You have to go on YouTube and look at turkey frying disasters. They're amazing. Favorite part of Thanksgiving.
And I know I know that's a thing.
We don't do it that much. We a couple of years ago we did the brining thing. That was interesting, but we've just been lazy and we're doing the roasting thing now. So.
Oh, okay. Well, good on you. Let's talk about another thing. Evidently, we're making people up. Back in 2016, Melvin Reddick, right here in the area, right around Harrisburg, a made-up guy who held, did a bunch of Facebook posts about Trump rallies and all kinds of stuff. We later find out he was the first construct of the Russian GRU. Now we've got this guy Melvin Aspen, who evidently is Swiss, but instead of just some redneck, he's now a really smart guy, a counterterrorism expert, and they've come out with a report. Thoughts?
Yeah, so this guy was supposedly a Swiss researcher who I guess works at what was the company, Typhoon Investigation? Typhoid, something. He authored this extensive report about Hunter Biden and all of these details, and Christopher Balding posted it on his website, and then some random dude somewhere else posted it, and the media wouldn't pick it up, and they're just like, oh, they're censoring this. And it turns out the reason the media wouldn't pick it up is it was just as absurd as everybody thought it was. I don't know what is in the entire document. I haven't read the entire document because why the hell would I? There's so far you can go into absurdity, and then you're just like, I have better things to do. I have to wash my hair. So this guy, who doesn't exist, it turns out that there's nobody in Switzerland named after with that name. The company, the investigation company that does research, has never heard of him and said that nobody works here by that name. So there's this intelligence report that exists, and Christopher Balding is like, oh, this is real. This guy really wrote it. It's just not like, that's not really his name. And it's just like, okay, so the guy's not real. Nobody lives in Switzerland by that name. His photo, his profile photo that's on everything was created by artificial intelligence, which I was saying I was so mad at myself because there is a site that I go to all the time that you put photos through to tell if they have either been doctored or if they are created by artificial intelligence. And it just like spits out, the result and, shows you what could have been altered. And I didn't do that with this guy's picture. And now I'm kicking myself because I'm like, I could have known this whole time. I could have known. But apparently this Aspen dude, which already, right? We should have known. That sounds like a fake name.
Yeah.
I assumed it was a Swiss thing. I should not assume that. Like
Skiing.
if the guy sounds like,
Yeah, it sounds
right?
like skiing.
It sounds like it was made up by somebody who was just like Swiss, Alps, skiing, Aspen, plus the Aspen Institute is that whole, thing. So I know it's just.
But that's
so
Colorado,
Balding
though.
is-
That's not Switzerland.
I know. Right, but can't you just see like some idiot trying to create a fake name?
Yeah.
Like this is the thing. I wrote under a fake name for a while, because I worked for somebody that said that I couldn't blog, and I was like, well, I'll do it. I'll just do it under a different name, and I just combined my great grandmother's name, so they were real people, And this just does not sound like a real person, and so this whole thing is just absurd, and Balding is still, on Twitter. I didn't put this in my report because he has just responded to it in the last couple hours. But he's all over Twitter being like, I still stand behind this. And, I can't believe reporters are saying that they don't trust anonymous sources. And it's like, no. This is not the thing about, you can believe anonymous sources if you trust the source and you confirm the source. Like nobody just makes something up and says, oh, anonymous source, and every reporter goes, oh, well then it's okay because it's anonymous. No, you have to actually call the anonymous source, confirm that they are who they say they are, and then get somebody to confirm that.
Right.
It's a little bit more than
There's
that.
a little
And-
legwork there. It's not just pulling stuff out of the dark side of the moon.
Yeah. So this whole story, it basically, it just means that everything was a lie. Everything was a lie. And it makes me feel really, really bad for Biden and his family.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure that they're used to this because of years and years of politics, and it's just so absurd. And I can't imagine, like, this family has had to deal with enough, right? Like they shouldn't have to be trying to defend complete nonsense.
Right, but because we were talking about this report, is trying to tie Hunter Biden to a bunch of the Ukraine stuff, right?
The Ukraine stuff and a lot of China stuff. That's one of the reasons I feel like Rudy Giuliani and Trump have been going back to this Biden-China thing. Like they're really obsessed with this Biden-China thing. And I think that sort of led them into trying to find associates of Hunter Biden's, or, people that could come up with something that sort of looked bad. Like Hunter Biden got advice from his dad on something. Hunter Biden had lunch with his dad and they talked about
His job.
I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But they said that they've got all these millions of dollars, and Joe Biden. I think the clip of him at his spiel in Florida was like he got like hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm going, but we've seen his tax returns.
yeah,
We haven't seen your tax returns, but we have
Right.
seen Joe Biden's tax returns. If he was getting this money, how did he launder it? And if that was actually a thing, and if you were actually accurate, then that would be a thing. I don't hear you saying IRS go look at him, which tells me it's all total BS. And I believe he knows it's BS.
I'm totally. I think he probably believes that not only it's BS, but he actually thinks that he could get away with it, and that what has been described is believable enough. And already, when I was reading this stuff, it sounded hinky, right? It just didn't sound right. And we should trust our instincts when we read stuff like that.
No, I fully do. And finally, I want to get your thoughts on Jerry Falwell Jr. Evidently, he it's one of these things where you just can't go away. I mean, you've been publicly shamed. You're publicly humiliated. The world sees you as this cuck. At some, you just go away. Go to your recess. Enjoy your whatever money daddy left you. Go away. Evidently, he's suing Liberty University for them firing him.
Yeah, and I don't understand. I mean, it really is like, just go away. Or I feel like there's always that story of the preacher who does, gets stuck with the hookers, or, is found to be embezzling something. And he has like this great moment of on the altar, talking to the Jesus and saying, I repent for my sins. And, I'm so sorry for all of the things that I did to all of you. And you deserve better, right? Like, it's that level of, you expect that. And it's almost, that worked for a lot of people for a while.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would work anymore, but I'm shocked he didn't try that first.
Yeah, but the thing is in order for that to work, there's got to be that act of contrition. That you see that, oh, I'm so sorry, I bare my soul, and I've been forgiven. That hasn't been the case here.
He's not going to apologize because he wants to still have orgies on a yacht somewhere.
You can still have your orgies on a yacht. Just apologize, because the folks who will forgive you are probably dupes to begin with, and you could probably get away with it a time or two more.
Just say that you're having the orgies for Jesus, and then you can call it a cult.
Oh yeah, but that guy got like 120 years in jail.
Well, don't kill anybody.
Well, there is that. Anyway, Sarah, as always fun talking with you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Have an awesome weekend.
You as well. Our good friend, Raw Story reporter Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work. She does really incredible stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
It was rapidly intensifying when it made landfall.
Hurricane Zeta slams into Louisiana, its fifth storm in a single season. Logging begins in pristine Tongass National Forest.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
China vaults ahead of U.S. on international climate pledge.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
Plus,
we are facing planetary emergencies like climate change with effectively no time left on the clock.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
The case for court reform to protect climate legislation.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Nice trucks. You think I could hop into one of them and drive it away? I'd love to just drive the hell out of here.
Yes, sir. Please, can I get the door for you? Do you need any snacks? Just go.
And take all the fossil fuel trucks with you.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think this is our last Green News Report before Election Day.
Yes, it is.
So make it a good one.
Okay. First up, Hurricane Zeta slammed into the beleaguered Louisiana coast as a Category 2 on Wednesday night, with wind speeds just 1 mile shy of official Category 3 status. Zeta set a new all-time record for Louisiana as the fifth named storm to make landfall in the state in a single hurricane season, all driven by record warm ocean waters. Also, some survivors of earlier hurricanes Laura and Delta are still without shelter or aid.
So they're still recovering from 2 previous hurricanes, and now a third one's come ashore.
Yes.
Great.
Zeta is the strongest hurricane to hit New Orleans since Hurricane Katrina. Zeta is generating high winds, storm surge, heavy rain, tornadoes, and widespread power outages across several states as it moves inland. And there is still a month to go in the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season.
So it's not a matter of the category, the wind speeds per se. It's a matter of the amount of water that is going to get dumped in Louisiana.
Yes. In other news, Senate Republicans on Monday rammed through the confirmation of new Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Who?
A week before the presidential election, expanding the Republicans' stolen right-wing majority, which has been increasingly dismissive of federal agency authority to set environmental regulations. In her rushed confirmation hearings, Barrett dodged questions on the established science on climate change. Several climate and environmental lawsuits are on the court's docket this year, including whether state lawsuits holding the fossil fuel industry liable for the cost of climate damages can be moved to federal courts where they're likely to be blocked.
You're too nice to say it, but her comments at that confirmation hearing made clear that Amy Coney Barrett is a climate science denier.
On a recent broadcast, Aaron Belkin of the nonprofit Take Back the Court explained why his group supports expanding and rebalancing the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal judiciary after years of Republican court packing in order to protect future climate legislation.
We are facing planetary emergencies like climate change with effectively no time left on the clock, and this court is highly unlikely to allow the next president to deal with those emergencies. All the legislation, all the executive orders, all the agency regulations, those are going to be at risk in a Biden administration, and the courts will have a Biden administration in handcuffs on day one.
That's true, if there is a Biden administration.
True. Meanwhile, man-made global warming accelerates. Year-to-date, January to September 2020 was the warmest January to September ever in recorded history since record-keeping began in the 1880s. That is according to NASA. The 5 hottest January to Septembers have all occurred in the last 5 years. Up in the Arctic, Arctic sea ice is at a record low for October. After a summer that saw polar temperatures topping 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Arctic scientists are alarmed that sea ice is failing to refreeze off of the coast of Siberia. Mounting scientific evidence suggests that loss of Arctic sea ice plays a major role in extreme weather events by slowing down the jet stream that moves weather systems around the planet. In Alaska, logging began on Thursday in the public's pristine Tongass National Forest after the Trump administration stripped away protections, including the roadless rule that had safeguarded one of the world's largest intact temperate rainforests. It's also a primary absorber of U.S. carbon emissions.
You know, when I said this was the last GNR before Election Day, make it a good one, I guess I should have said, make it a good news one.
Well, finally, there is a bit of good news.
Finally.
In a major shift, China has announced it will stop releasing carbon emissions within 40 years. A surprise increase that vaults China ahead of the U.S. in climate ambitions under the Paris Climate Accord. This week, Japan and South Korea also announced higher targets. Both of those countries are aiming for net zero emissions by 2050. All three are major importers of fossil fuels. The announcements mark a big shift in international climate relations.
All I can say at this point is please go vote. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So counting down the days to Election Day. Now, I've had a number of really interesting phone calls because I've been making calls for Eugene DePasquale's campaign. And you know, because look, I would love to have Eugene as my congressman here in the center of Pennsylvania. It'd be great to finally have someone who represents my views. And veterans issues seem to pop up quite often. Because they give Scott Perry, who is the incumbent, a lot of credit for just having been in the military. And look, the throw out these things like, Donald Trump has fixed everything that's been wrong with the VA. He's done everything veterans want. And also, they don't believe that he ever said that veterans were losers and suckers, which was kind of interesting, given his comment about John McCain. But there is this weird little world. And I know a lot of people who say we need to be electing more veterans, more people with military experience. I'm here to share some thoughts on how we do that. I've asked Roger Musa to come talk with us. He's the executive director of Taking the Hill. And the website, if you want to check that out, is takingthehillpack.com. Roger, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me on, Rick. I'm glad you had a loser and a sucker on your show today. It's nice to be here.
The reality is, every issue seems to be so polarized. It used to be, I know nobody's ever been a monolith and no one ever speaks entirely for the veterans, but I hear so many, competing total opposites of, Donald Trump and the Republicans have completely fixed the VA. And yet I know there are 50,000 fewer people working at the VA than they need. And I hear horror stories. Where are we?
Well, I don't think we're any better than we were 4 years ago. And I think our mission at Taking the Hill has been to tell a different story about veterans than the one that Donald Trump wants you to hear, right? Not every veteran is a Republican. Not every veteran is a grizzled Navy SEAL. In fact, 99% of us aren't grizzled Navy SEALs, and about half of us aren't Republicans. We're focused on service. We're focused on, bringing people together. And I think, God willing, we're going to elect Joe Biden, an Army dad, our next president of the United States and Commander-in-Chief. And as we look to recover from the last 4 years of just partisan debauchery led by the Trump White House, the people that we think can lead us through are veterans and military family members who've shown their integrity over years in service and in public life after the service.
Your organization was started by former Pennsylvania Congressman Patrick Murphy, someone we've had on the program. We used to have him on quite often, haven't talked to him in a while. But one of these guys who, very upfront, we've got to take care of the people that we put into harm's way. We've got to keep our promise. And sadly, regardless of what I hear people talking about Trump, I still don't see us honoring that pledge to take care of those who are the ones we put up on a pedestal and call heroes.
Right. And I mean, it's pretty evident in the way that he talks about those who serve, regardless of whether or not you believe the Atlantic article. I mean, it's been a long 4 years, and I think part of Trump's, shtick is to just make everything so bad every day that we forget about the crazy stuff he did a year ago. You remember, it wasn't too long ago, he wouldn't go to Dover to see the flag-draped American caskets come off of the aircraft coming back from overseas. He has spoken ill of, and again, think what you want of Secretary Mattis, but a man who stepped up to serve this administration. Speaking ill of him, someone that Marines, a branch of the military you don't want to mess with, revere, right? Talking about how he's overrated. So it's in the way that he postures himself to those of us who have served. I think if you talk to most veterans, we're not looking for a handout. Many of us, I speak for myself here, feel uncomfortable. Even as a combat veteran of 2 deployments, flying off the deck of aircraft carriers, I feel uncomfortable when people say thank you for your service, right? What we, I think, at Taking the Hill believe is don't thank us for our service. Serve with us, right? Be a part of having the backs of veterans, military family members, military caregivers, right? People who have put themselves on the line to serve something larger than themselves, which stands, by the way, in such stark contrast to this idea of Donald Trump, someone who seems to serve only himself. We are the polar opposite of that.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that I always say is, because I just talked about this the other day. I had a long conversation with a veteran who, for him, veterans issues were front and foremost. And I said, well, for me, it's more than just about putting a sticker on your car or, saying thank you. It's about honoring our word and taking care of people that we promised we would take care of. And it's about, taking care of the future soldiers. And, maybe this is where we start talking about, how making sure that every child has enough food, shelter, education, is treated properly so that the future soldiers don't come into the military having a bunch of a baggage with them that causes them harm down the road as well. Can we agree to that? And there was no going there. But, for me, it's more than just, as you've said, saying thank you and putting a ribbon on a car. It's much more than that.
Yeah, and I think, it's been interesting. I think that even within the Democratic Party, we have, as veterans, struggled to have our issues front and center. And really maybe not for the first time in a long time, because of this president and because of those who would denigrate the service of people like John McCain, veterans' issues and our honor as people who have served and our families who served with us are front and center in this election. I think what we have seen and what we're proud to help support at Taking the Hill are those who are stepping up to serve again and say there's a better way, there's a different way. We've served our country once before, and we're ready to do it again.
Yeah, for me, I didn't serve in the military, but I respect the people who do. And ultimately, I come back to the main point. As a kid growing up in the 70s, I grew up in a housing project where I saw the men coming back from Vietnam who were just dumped into our community. And, when we got involved in Iraq and Afghanistan and all of the other things we do, I say, I never want to see that happen again. I never want to see my children or other people's children see that kind of treatment of those people ever again. We make promises, we take care of them. So the question that I have is, how do we make sure we do that? And to me, it's electing people who are going to keep those promises. And you guys have got a slate of some pretty impressive candidates. Like I said at the beginning, Eugene DePasquale here in Pennsylvania's 10th congressional district. What other races around the country do you see as possible for your folks to take over?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, all 29, because one of the things, we talk about Taking the Hill PAC, we're doing three things. Number one is we're supporting veterans of integrity for Congress, the House and the Senate. But we've also expanded how we talk about veterans issues to include military family members. That's why we're proud to endorse Eugene DePasquale, whose dad was a Vietnam veteran, someone who struggled with addiction, right? It's an important perspective to have, that when we just focus on veterans issues, we don't get that whole picture of service. That's why we're proud to endorse Deb Holland down in New Mexico 1, whose mom and dad both served in the military. We've endorsed Qasim Rashid in Virginia's 1st District, whose brother is a United States Marine. We just got so many races. The second thing that we do is we focus, because we're not a super PAC, we're a regular federally registered PAC. We support races in tough districts, and we define tough as, according to the Partisan Voter Index, D+3 to about R+9 or 10. So all of our races right now, all 29 candidates that we are actively supporting, are within about single digits of a difference, either up or down. And then the third thing that we do, that we believe in, is our support is more than money. Politics these days has just become, or it is just about how much money you got in the bank, right? How many donors do you have? And what we've said, Patrick and I have both run for Congress at the federal level, is we need to start a conversation about access to mental health care in public service, and for us, specifically in political public service. So we help provide access to that care for candidates and their staff, make sure that as they're going through this very, emotionally, physically intense process of running for office to serve again, they have access to the care that they need. So, there's some great races. We have Amy Kennedy, New Jersey 2nd, who's running against Jeff Van Drew. She's in a very tight race. Max Rose is running for re-election in New York 11 in a tight race. One of the races that we're super proud of to support is Teresa Greenfield, who's running for Senate in Iowa. She is the mother of an active duty Army son, right? So there's a lot of these great stories that, we're proud to support all of our veterans, but we feel really honored to support family members and those who, they didn't serve in uniform themselves, but they know what it means to care for those who have served.
Yeah, and the woman in Iowa, that's a seat that was held by Tom Harkin, who I always thought was a great labor Democrat, and to have Joni Ernst in that seat, it would make me happy to see that return to a good labor Democrat and a veteran Democrat. But here's the thing, and I like the way you've laid this out, that veterans and their families, because sometimes that gets set aside. Because I actually think family members or people who know people who've served are probably even more willing to do or go that extra mile, because a lot of the veterans I know, they don't want the attention. They don't want to ask for the help. As for someone like me, who, as I've said before, I didn't serve, I'm more willing to say, no, you made a promise. We've got to honor that promise 100%. There's no going back on it, and you have to be hardcore about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we think, right? Is expand what it means to serve, because if and the exact numbers escape me off the top of my head, right? But it's less than 1% of Americans serve on active duty in the armed forces. But if you include their family members and beyond their immediate family members, you're bumping it to 5 to 10% of folks who now are related to somebody who served, and that's the conversation space we need to be in, is not shutting out those people and telling them, well, you're not a veteran, so your story doesn't matter, but including them is a vital part, because we know as veterans, right, we would not survive deployment without our families, letters from home, care packages, people praying for us, rooting for us, right? That's what sustains us through combat and through deployments far from home. That shouldn't end after deployment, right?
Right.
We sustain one another through this relationship that I think, and Patrick and I both think, should exist in the political realm as well. I think we can work together. We're willing to work with people, across the aisle who are of integrity and get work done.
I'm right there with you. A minute ago, you said that it's not all about the money. The money helps, though, right? So if people wanted to donate, they could go to takingthehillpac.com and make a donation, right?
That's right. We're about $25,000 from being able to max out to all of our candidates, which is a big deal. This is really our first cycle on our own, and we've done a lot of work. I got to credit, Patrick Murphy, former Army Undersecretary, who really, is a good friend to a lot of people and is doing a lot of good work. This is, his idea. This is his passion. I'm just proud and honored to be a part of it and to do so much good work for so many good people. I know that we're going to win. Joe Biden's going to win, November 3rd, whenever we find out the results. But we're going to get a lot of veterans back into Congress and a lot of military family members into Congress. And I think that's going to be a great thing to celebrate and lead us out of this dark period in our history.
Yeah, good stuff. Again, takingthehillpac.com, the website. We'll get links on it. Folks can maybe send a couple of bucks. Is there anything outside of monetary donations? You guys make calls, you do that kind of stuff too?
Absolutely, and we'll hang all that stuff up on our website too in the events page. But everybody, if you can commit to making between now and November 3rd at least an hour of calls, whether it's for Joe Biden or any of these candidates, right? Everybody's up on the website. Mobilize. If you search Mobilize, and whoever your favorite candidate is, you can find opportunities to phone bank. In some states, people are safely knocking doors or dropping literature. That's the phase of the campaign we're in, right? We need not to bring up my Navy bias, but we need all hands on deck right now to win across the board. There you go. Good stuff, Roger. I appreciate you taking time for us and sharing the work that you guys do. Of course. Thanks so much, Rick. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. Roger Miso, Executive Director of Taking the Hill, the website takingthehillpac.com. Like I said, if you got a couple of bucks, throw it their way. Always helpful. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day that the National Organization for Women, or NOW, called for a strike by women across the nation. They called the day Alice Doesn't Day. This referred to a critically acclaimed movie by the director Martin Scorsese that came out the year before, entitled Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. The main character in the film is Alice Height, who pursues her dream of being a singer after she is widowed. The film was lauded by feminists as a story of women's empowerment. NOW used the film title and asked women to participate with the slogan, Alice Doesn't, you fill in the blank. Women were encouraged to participate in the day however they could, including refraining from volunteering, shopping, and if possible, working for one day to demonstrate their importance to the economy. Women who could not skip work were asked to wear armbands to show their solidarity with the cause. In an interview published in the Chicago Tribune, NOW President Karen DeCrow explained, quote, "There is a myth that women in the workforce could go home. But if they did, our economy would stop. If all the secretaries did not come to work, all things would stop." But not all women were excited about the day. Some anti-feminist women decided to protest the day by wearing pink, baking cookies, and performing other stereotypical female tasks. While NOW called the event a success, Time magazine deemed it a spectacular failure. One critique was that the event reflected the white middle-class dominance of the women's movement. Working-class women, and especially women of color, had a much more difficult time withholding their labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, that's one of those issues, the veteran issues that, I don't think we've done enough on. I talk to my friends at the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, and they tell me there's like 50,000 positions in the VA that have yet to be filled. People talk about, we got these long waiting times. Well, could it be that you don't have the people to fill the jobs that need to be done and you haven't done the work to get qualified people into those jobs? And again, the thing that Trump takes credit for, opening up the VA to allow people to go to other places, that was in the works during the Obama era. So, again, he's taking credit for something he didn't actually entirely do. But, we're just in this weird kind of place where we just don't do things because they're right anymore. And, I think back to that time when I was, when I was a kid, whenever you saw, that big army green coat, you saw somebody in despair. You saw somebody broken. You saw somebody with broken body, a broken mind, horrible drug and alcohol addictions. One of my first memories of that green coat was a guy, sitting up against the neighbor's house between the two bushes with a needle in his arm, dead. That image, stays with me. And that's, we're going back 45 years. And whenever you talk about those issues, whenever you talk about veterans issues, I don't ever want to see anybody's kids see that. And you hear these horror stories of the enormous number of suicides and the drug addiction and all the stuff that comes along with it, and you go, we're not doing enough. And they go, how much is enough? Well, how much is enough is enough to stop it. But I guess that's the place we're in right now, where we literally have a guy who, whether you believe Trump said, the veterans are suckers and losers because he didn't want to go to the cemetery in France or not, he still, to John McCain, well, I don't like people who get captured. That's literally nuts to me. But I guess it's the world in which we live in. You remember during the 2016 campaign, the whole email thing? Hillary used a personal email server and did personal emails, and we find out that Jared and Ivanka and the rest of them are using WhatsApp and private email and all kinds of stuff. Nobody on the right seems to care about that. And I'm not making any justification for Hillary using a private email server. That should have been something our government mandated, that there be a functional email service that they used, and mandated that they use it, which they didn't. But now, after that whole campaign, after all that lock her up over the email nonsense, like I said, we find out Jared and the rest of them are using private email and WhatsApp. We now find out that the Pompeos, yes, the Pompeos, evidently been doing a lot of back and forth with the State Department's diplomatic service, to just kind of do home repairs around the house. Evidently, the wife Susan, has been emailing the Secretary of State's Protective Division about HVAC repairs. Porch light needed to be repaired. Some steps needed repair. I guess we're now using the State Department as a personal handy fix-it company. I guess, is that what I'm getting? But NBC reported that both Congress and the State Department's Inspector General have been investigating the potential misuse of government resources by Pompeo and his wife. And again, these are the people who said, we're going to do things differently. We're going to drain the swamp. We're better than that. And as I've said from the beginning, they're not. And in most cases, they're worse. And are you surprised by it? The answer, obviously, quite not. And finally, an exclusive report by the Wall Street Journal. Evidently, the Department of Health and Human Services has canceled, because remember, Donald Trump said if you vote for Joe Biden, there's going to be no more Christmas, there's going to be no more Thanksgiving, no one's going to get married, no more 4th of July. According to the Wall Street Journal, that hippie liberal left-wing, I can't even say it right. The Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class, the Health and Human Services has canceled a advertising plan for the coronavirus vaccine that would have targeted Santa Claus performers and Mrs. Claus and the elves. Mrs. Claus and the elves would have gotten some vaccine too, but they had a plan that Santa was going to get the vaccine right up there with doctors and nurses, and Mrs. Claus too. We're not going to leave her out. We're not going to be sexist. And the elves, and I'm sure somewhere in the report it was going to say that they're smaller, so they won't need as much, which is just crazy. But evidently, the plan was going to cost about $250 million in taxpayer funds. And the idea, again, was to defeat despair and to inspire hope by having the jolly fat guy sitting in the malls having kids sneeze and cry all over him, and that he would be protected by the vaccine. And I started thinking about this, going, how many of the Santas would take the vaccine and put themselves in that kind of danger? I don't know that I would, but hey, it's not going to happen because they canceled the plan. But there was actually a plan. Michael Caputo, the guy who's now on medical leave for sanity issues or whatever, he was the first one to suggest it. This public service ad campaign to help end despair, inspire hope by bringing Santa and the helpers back. Now, some Democrats, I guess, were upset about the $250 million. I'll be honest with you. I am not entirely against the idea of trying to get Santa back in the mall. Again, it comes back to this personal responsibility things. My kids aren't going. He should be sitting there by himself. But don't we have better things to do? I mean, I'm not gonna mock it too badly, other than it's stupid. But don't we have better things to do? Like maybe not have super spreader events like Santa at the mall. For those of us who have stood in those lines for 3 or 4 hours, with kids who are screaming and sick, do you think it would probably not be the best idea? And I get that, you know, Christmas is their little thing that keeps us stupid. The war on Christmas. But this just, again, seems like one of those moments. We could have spent the money better. Like maybe helping out people who have lost their jobs so that they can afford a Christmas present instead of going to sit on Santa's lap and sneeze in his face. Just a thought. Just a thought. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm David Philman, the